on the SS4A and safety improvement. So this is a great occasion to learn the experience to improve the safety from different parts of southeastern United States, from mountain to sea, right? So quick housekeeping item is that we have 4 speakers and we have a lot of content to go through it. So if you have questions, just note down your questions, and we're going to conduct Q&A at the end. And this session qualifies for AICP and PDH credit, so we can get your credit at the end of the row on the table. And finally, if you have questions at the end of the Q&A, please use the microphones, so we have a virtual audience they can hear. All right, so let's start. Our first presenter is Andrew Lewis from City of Atlanta on Vision Zero implementation and Power Street. Andrew Lewis is a project manager in the Office of Capital Delivery at Atlanta Department of Transportation. His role and previously in the Office of Strategy and Planning at the City of Atlanta DOT. Andrew manages a range of multimodal projects, including sidewalk installations, safety street, new multi-use trails, and federally funded scoping studies. Previously, Andrew worked as a consultant in the traffic group at ACADAS, where he focused on applying traffic modeling and data analysis to help private and public clients in Georgia solve transportation issues and plan for the future. Please welcome Andrew.
Thank you, Zong. Thanks, everybody, for being here. As I said, we've got a lot to move through, so I will move through as quickly as I can. I'm Andrew Lewis. I am in the Office of Capital Delivery now, so doing that side of project management. I'm a little bit of a stand-in here as far as this presentation goes, because I'm kind of the ITE guy here. So excited to share a lot of what we're doing at the City of Atlanta. Big focus of our presentation is going to be Vision Zero, and just kind of background of our Vision Zero program of Atlanta. And then I'll talk more about our specific SS4A projects. We have an implementation grant that we were awarded in 2023, and I'll share an update on that project. And we have also submitted an application this summer, which we haven't heard back from yet, so I don't know if we'll get it, but I want to share some of what we hope to do with SS4A dollars. And so didn't go quite the direction I thought it would. So what we'll talk about here is actually first talking about our Vision Zero plan overall, and then we'll talk about the Vision Zero implementation, which is what we've included in our proposal this year for SS4A funding. And then finally, at the end, I'll give an update on our Prior Street and Central Avenue Safe Streets project. Let me just see if I can change the view here to the speaker notes. Not sure how to do that to show. I guess I'll just have to look at this here. Okay. So I'll move forward. So first starting with Vision Zero, and hopefully you guys are very familiar with Vision Zero, and if not, I know some of our other presenters here will give a lot of background on what Vision Zero is. But for us, just the problem that we are trying to solve in Atlanta is that people are being killed on our roads, and furthermore, that the frequency of these life-altering and these life-ending crashes in our city has been increasing. Now, this is a global issue that's happening all over the country. However, even compared to our peer cities, the city of Atlanta has a high rate of these fatal crashes. So, what is our goal? Whenever I pick up a new board game, first question I ask, how do I win? Right? What's the goal? For us, that is exactly what Vision Zero is describing. Our goal is to eliminate all fatal and serious injury crashes. Get that down to zero. Now, the City of Atlanta is a Vision Zero city. What that means, our city council in 2020 adopted the Vision Zero safety program. And that legislation in 2020 was within just a couple months of the legislation that created our Department of Transportation in the City of Atlanta. So our department and safety have always been very closely linked. Now, this came from the background off of our comprehensive transportation plan, which we completed in 2018, which put safety as the number one system for us to solve, and that's what we've built off of in creating a department and doing our Vision Zero program. And since then, you can see some of these milestones, how these have come. We started on our Vision Zero action plan, which was completed at the end of last year. We got awarded in 2023 an implementation grant for the Pryor Street and Central Avenue Safe Streets project. And here we are in 2024. We've applied for another grant opportunity from SS4A, which we will talk about. So first to go into some background of our Vision Zero action plans. Like I said, this was just completed, hot off the press in November of 2023. Our partners at the Tool Design Group helped us out with this, and it's available on our website. You can go and look at it. And my presentation today, I'm going to focus on three sections out of this. Basically, the data analysis that supported this work, our Safer Streets checklist, and our implementation plan. So first, on the data analysis side. This is a very big problem that we're trying to solve, and we have very, very finite time and resources and people. So prioritization is key. We've got to focus on areas where we have the best return on investment, the most impact. So first we're going to look at vulnerable road users. What we see is although they are involved in 1.3% and 0.2% of crashes, respectively, pedestrians and bicyclists, they account for 11.2% and 1.7% of serious injuries and fatalities. In other words, 10 times as likely for that crash to result in a serious injury or a fatality. So we prioritize them. Next, we looked at locations on different parts of our city. What we saw is that the least safe 10% of our roads in the city by lane miles account for 73%. I have that number right? Sorry, I can't see it on the screen. 73% of the serious injury and fatal crashes in the city. This is including our locally owned and our GDOT state routes, but it is excluding the interstates. Now, these roads we identified as our high injury network. You can see this map here. In blue is our city-owned roads, and in red are our GDOT-owned roads. That just tells us where we have had crashes in the past. That is very important to know. We can go out and try to rectify that, but it's not the complete picture. Thankfully, serious crashes and fatal crashes are still pretty rare occurrences. However, what that means is that we might have many locations that are just as unsafe, and we just have not had one of those serious or fatal crashes happen yet. And we hear from people every single day. They'll tell us, they'll say, I know that this is unsafe. Here's the issue. Does somebody have to die for you guys to do something about this? And the answer, obviously, should be no. And so that's where we tried to look systematically at the common characteristics of the areas where we saw high crash rates. And so what we can see here is roads that have 4 or more lanes of traffic in 2 directions. We're averaging several thousand vehicles per day of traffic, not median separated, a signalized intersection with turning movement conflicts and a lot of bicycle and pedestrian traffic, and mixed land use where we have multiple modes trying to cross one another. And what we were able to do with that is create our comprehensive risk network. And so this is everywhere we want to prioritize from a safety perspective, not just where there have already been crashes. Next, we looked through an equity lens. We looked at socioeconomic data to identify the communities where the residents who drive in these areas are the least well-served by the current transportation system. We know people in these areas are less likely to own cars. Their lives are more likely to be affected negatively when they end up in a crash or they lose access to their car. And when they are involved in a crash, they're more likely for that crash to be a serious injury or a fatality. So we prioritize these areas. And you can see this map here of our communities of concern. These are mostly in the south and to the west of the city of Atlanta. So that concludes the data analysis portion of our Vision Zero action plan. And I'll talk now, we have a Safe Streets education guide and Safer Streets selection tool. And what this is our toolbox that is specific to the city of Atlanta of countermeasures that we have seen to be successful in mitigating the kinds of crashes that we see most prevalently in the city, and which we have been replicable. These are things that are already implemented within the city. Our users, our local officials are familiar with these types of countermeasures. This is kind of our localized toolbox, and the education guide and the selection tool work very similar. If you're familiar with GDOT's intersection control evaluation or ICE tool, the goal here is just to put these design alternatives at our forefront, to be considering them in all of the projects that we do, not just for our engineers, but also our elected officials and other leaders within the city. And then we also have systemic safety countermeasures. These are basically things that we've identified in the city of Atlanta that we say, these are broadly applicable. We know that they work at any location where it is desired. This can be implemented without any further crash analysis or traffic analysis. And I'll go a little bit more into these as we talk about implementation, which is where we are now. So our Vision Zero action plan includes an implementation plan, which is built on a few key pillars, I guess you could say. The first of these being our capital projects. So in 2023, Atlanta voters approved a massive $450 million bond and T-SPLOST program to fund capital projects. And so in the locations where we have those capital projects funded, that is going to be this very first opportunity for us to apply our Vision Zero goals. And that can be doing Safe Streets projects. We have a ton of Safe Streets projects, $90 million worth included in that plan. However, even on projects that aren't explicitly safety focused, we can prioritize which ones we do first based on these criteria that we have, our high injury network and our comprehensive risk network. And also these projects that aren't necessarily safety focused in nature, we can still make sure that these safe countermeasures are incorporated within the design. And then next we have other action items. We'll take a look at what some of those are later on. But these near-term actions are sort of departmental and organizational in nature of just kind of how we position ourselves and the areas that we prioritize our budget in order to try to tackle Vision Zero. And then these short and medium-term actions you can think of as the kinds of things that might lack capital funding, but we know we want to generally see these types of things happening citywide and try to tackle that as soon as we can and find funding for those as soon as we can. So very, very aspirational. So I will next talk about how the Safe Streets for All program fits into this Vision Zero action plan that we have created. And first, obviously, you can see we got a $30 million implementation grant award, and we'll talk about that later on the Pryor Street and Central Avenue Safe Streets project. So that's one of those capital projects I was telling you about. That's going to put some little, more meat on the bones, get that federal funding in that project, help it go further. Next, what I'm very excited by and what I'm going to talk about next is what we submitted this summer in the 2024 round of implementation grant applications. And that was to request funding for action items out of our Vision Zero implementation plan citywide. So not a particular intersection or a particular street, but more kind of quick fix items to address our Vision Zero implementation plan. And that request was for $12 million. So hopefully we get it. If anybody is here with USDOT, sounds great, right? So what is included in that proposal would be a funding for basically 3 areas. So the first of these is quick build projects on the high injury network and our systemic risk network where we don't already have capital projects. Second would be our Fatal Crash Review Commission. And third would be these other action items from our Vision Zero plan, which I'll talk about. So first is quick build projects on our high injury network and systemic risk network. So this would provide a source of funding for these locations where we don't already have a capital project in the works. And it would both be just our capacity as a department, whether that's hiring more planners or engineers, or giving us a pot of money that allows us to go give a contract out to the consulting community to help us to do just crash analysis, historical crash review of these locations where we don't have capital projects, recommend short-term quick fix implementation projects, and then have the funding to go out and build those things. And some examples of what those projects can be, we have daylighting in intersections, which is basically restricting parking at that 20 to 30 feet right in front of a crosswalk to allow just greater visibility of drivers as they're approaching the intersection and help ensure that safety for pedestrians. Bump outs, which you also see here as curb. Actually can't see what we have written down there. But bump outs there, which essentially reduces the turn radius of an intersection, slow down traffic even more, increase that awareness as people are going through intersections in the city. Leading pedestrian head start at signalized intersections for pedestrians to get out and to be visible for drivers before they get the green light. Protecting bike lanes, and this might be just going out and putting bollards in locations where we already have buffered bike lanes throughout the city. Slip lane closures, which is a little bit more controversial, but something that we've identified as a city that we really want to try to close these slip lanes whenever and wherever we can, and to avoid vehicles just flying through crosswalks right there. And then I have speed tables here. That's really just that other category of many other things that are in this toolbox, pretty low cost that can help us, whether that be slowing vehicles down or just increasing driver awareness in areas, particularly where we have multiple modes and different users. Here's an example of what one of those quick build projects can look like. This is something that we are working on right now and can get even more funding from out of this grant opportunity. Calling micromobility corrals, and these basically serve a twofold function. First, of accomplishing this daylighting by setting aside that, say 20, 30 feet right in front of an intersection. But then we actually use that space and we put in bike parking, bike racks, place to stop your micromobility devices. Those are those Bird, those Lime scooters, to have a dedicated area that people can use. So it's given a community benefit as well. So the second item that would be included in this grant application to be funded by SS4A is our Fatal Crash Review Commission. We have actually created this commission already, but what we don't have is dedicated funding source. So what this would provide is that dedicated funding every single time from here on out that we have a fatal crash, to go out to do safety analysis, to go out and do a site visit, to identify immediate countermeasures that could help prevent that crash in the future, and also have that pot of money to go out and do some quick build projects on these locations case-by-case basis. And then finally are these other Vision Zero action items that we have, and I will not read this entire list to you. I've got 2 slides here that I'll show up, but just some examples of the kinds of things that are in this action plan that are currently unfunded or have very limited funding in our city's budget. And that includes things like creating a striping squad, which for those of you who know our whole posse that we have that our mayor created, this is just a dedicated team. It's got manpower, it's got resources, we've got the painted striping, we've got illegible markings, things that are creating an unsafe condition, and just require us to be out there today and to address that, so we can go out and do that. Some other things that are included on this list are LPI implementation. Our city council actually passed legislation calling on our Department of Transportation to implement leading pedestrian intervals at every single signalized intersection in the city where deemed safe, including our GDOT-owned intersections. And this, even though it's mostly just, coding that signal timing change, that takes manpower, right? That's capacity that we don't have. We don't have a dedicated funding source right now. And in many cases, especially where we have GDOT intersections, maybe some more traffic studies are needed before we can actually just... Next slide here, again, more of these action items. One that I just want to call out on this slide is just doing some systematic review of where we have mid-block crossings throughout the city. Maybe air just striped and could have an RRFB, locations with an RRFB that could be a pedestrian hybrid beacon, or maybe crossings that could be a raised crosswalk, and we could go and implement that and have some funding to do that. I think I'm okay on time, but I'm going to wrap up very quickly. The last thing that I want to talk about today is our Pryor Street and Central Avenue Safe Streets project. So this is a federally funded project. We got a grant from the Federal Highway Administration through the Safe Streets for All program of $30 million for an implementation grant. So at least in that funding cycle, that was the largest implementation grant that was awarded. It's a very exciting project, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. So first off, how this came to be and how this got to be programmed. So this was included in that Moving Atlanta Forward T-SPLOST and Bond program that I told you guys about. This was in 2022. Atlanta voters passed this. That's a $400 million infrastructure bond with about $100 million of that dedicated to transportation, and then a $350 million T-SPLOST, all of which transportation projects, for a combined $450 million of transportation projects. And we had a project list that was included in that referendum that was part of what voters voted on. Specific projects, specific locations, specific dollar amounts tied to each of those projects. So one of those was the Pryor Street and Central Avenue Safe Streets project. We had about $10 million earmarked for this, and this would connect downtown to the Beltline and go through the South Side neighborhood. Now we were able to take that $10 million and instead leverage it as a local match of 25% in our grant application for SS4A. We were awarded the full $30 million that we requested, giving us a $40 million project budget to extend the limits a little bit further up in downtown, make that full connection to the Beltline, and incorporate some more project features, which I'm excited to tell you about. So what are these streets? What's Pryor Road? What's Central Avenue? These are a north-south one-way pair in downtown and south of downtown. They cross over both I-20 north and south and I-75. So these are important connections across the interstate. Other features here, at kind of south of where that arrow is, they join together at Pryor Road as two-way south of that point. And then you can see where that connects. The dotted line is the current/proposed alignment of the Beltline. Both of these roads, are basically the entire project, is part of our high injury network, and you can see intersects with a lot of other roads that are on our high injury network. Also from the safety side, we have a big history of historical crashes. Depending on which years you select, we've had a couple of fatal crashes, both vehicle crashes and pedestrian crashes that have resulted in fatalities. You can see a very consistent grid of crashes there in downtown where we have that kind of bumper-to-bumper traffic and a lot of signals. And then more focused clusters of crashes south of I-20 where we have higher operating speeds. We've got some on-ramps and off-ramps going to and from I-20 and the downtown connector. And so that speed differential and where people are getting over multiple lanes either to get on the interstate or to make a turn right after they got off of the interstate is resulting in these serious crashes. From that equity standpoint, that south side neighborhood that's in this area that would be connected is a historically disadvantaged neighborhood in Atlanta. It's one of these that has been affected and separated by the interstate system that came through Atlanta. So this is an opportunity to help to connect and to better that neighborhood as well. And another great opportunity with the Pryor Street and Central Avenue project is we just have a very, very big canvas to work with. We have a lot of space out there. We've got 3 to 4 lanes dedicated to vehicles in each direction, sometimes a combination of travel lanes and parking lanes. We've got a lot of space out there to hopefully reutilize. So you can see this is right where they come together or split, depending on your perspective. This is where, like I was saying, we have on and off ramps with the interstate. And you can see that hostile infrastructure for pedestrians, where we do have sidewalks just kind of disappear when the interstate comes around. That takes precedence, obviously, and not a very pleasant place to bike either. And then you can see what that condition looks like in downtown. More space for parking, a little bit slower moving, but a lot of vehicle lanes there. So what are we going to do with this project? We are, first and foremost, we're going to resurface, that full is about 4 miles of roadway. We are going to repurpose those vehicle lanes, essentially a road diet. We are going to put in protected bicycle lanes with that space that we've won back from the vehicles, right? And then all of these throughout, kind of what this big budget that we've been able to have is going to allow us to really, hopefully, achieve Vision Zero for this corridor. So everything I talked about in that action plan, we want to see across these 4 miles. So evaluating every single mid-block crossing, looking at every single signalized intersection, trying to create that protection, that safety, make it just a really, really pleasant boulevard to connect to downtown, to get people to the Beltline, to get people moving around Atlanta. Here's just some typical sections of what that could look like. And then just on where we are. So we're currently in design. We're actually working on the procurement of our design consultant right now, hoping to finish up design in 2026 and complete construction in 2029. One key element of the Safe Streets for All program is we have a hard cutoff. We have 5 years to build this or we lose the money. So we are working very, very hard to hit that deadline to get through design and to get shovels in the ground and do this. Here's our socials. And then some information here. You can see our project website. I didn't link our Vision Zero, but you can find that online. And then my contact information. And then I've also shared our Vision Zero manager's contact information, who is way more involved in the Vision Zero stuff. So I'm glad I could talk on his behalf. But if you want more info on that, he can help you. And then actually the Pryor Street and Central Avenue project, I'm actually no longer the project manager of, just as we've been growing our team and reorganizing. So we got a new project manager for that. His information is at the bottom there. And thank you all for your time. I'll pass it back to Zong.
So before we start on the next speakers, I want to fix a small problem. Promise is not cross-strike related. It's a small, so I just, yeah. All right. So our next speaker is Bhide from City of Tampa. T-Safe, the safety equity on Tampa Street. So Vic is a director of mobility department for the City of Tampa. He has over 20 years of research, consulting, and the local government experience in urban mobility. As director of the mobility department, his duty include oversight of city's transportation parking, the stormwater portfolios. Vic also lead the city's intersection of innovation program, which assists local startups in doing business with the city government. He also served as a board member of ITS Florida, board member for the Museum of Science and Industry. Vic worked on behalf of the City of Tampa, partner with FDOT and the University of South Florida Center for Urban Transportation and Research to form Tampa Bay Smart City Alliance, a public-private academia alliance to pilot grow transportation technology initiatives. Welcome, Vic.
Thank you, Zong. Good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is going to be about our Safe Streets for All Implementation Award and the projects associated with it. Kind of similar to Matt's presentation relative to Vision Zero and all of that as well. So it's probably best delivered by our Vision Zero engineer and our Vision Zero team, but they're all in Philly, so I'll do my best. All right, so countywide, Tampa, Florida is in Hillsborough County, and countywide, our MPO has identified about $800 million in safety project needs overall. So some of the projects we're going to talk about get us started and are really about spreading as much benefits from quick build projects across the city as we can within the resources that we have right now. But this is just to say that we've got a long way to go. So our mayor, Jane Castor, used to be our chief of police, which really helps because one, she has run a large organization before, and another understands limited funding and what you can do to spread that and get the most out of it. So when she came in with a 5-pronged strategy citywide, with transportation at the very top. It continues to be an Achilles heel for Tampa Bay and Florida in general, especially when it comes to safety. But along with that came smarter growth, better workforce development, housing attainability, affordability, and we've done a lot of investing in that as well. And the lens through which we view all of these, what brings it all together, and that's sustainability and resilience. Tampa Bay sitting on the largest estuary in Florida. We're kind of climate change central in that regard. So that's always a consideration. So the mayor did kick us off with a transportation committee formed or consisting of many folks within the community. This was about 5 years ago. And they gave us our marching orders. And you see the list out there. Adopting Vision Zero as a citywide policy was one of them. And we've been working on transit projects, on trails. Vision Zero, certainly, that's the topic of discussion today. Reinventing urban parking, I could speak on that because we've used parking revenues and invested them in safety in very creative ways, including our ferries and our micromobility program. And then, of course, working better with the community at large. The goal with this entire strategy was really to have a thriving community that makes it easier to access jobs, so that's where transit comes in, has safer streets for all. Again, Florida cities tend to be among the top 10 least safe for all users, especially bicyclists and pedestrians. Housing is a challenge that every city in the U.S. is facing right now. Housing and transportation, those two kind of go hand in hand. And then schools, particularly access to schools. And with Florida, what we're trying to do, especially in Tampa and Hillsborough County, is facilitate safer walks to schools. Because our school board has a policy that they will not bus within a 2-mile radius of a school. which really makes it more important that we make it easier for children to walk to school. So we started with a Vision Zero action plan just to understand what are our needs, what do we need to do, and how do we get there. Needless to say, it's very data-driven. It clearly defines the problem that we're trying to solve, eliminating fatalities and severe injuries. It helps to establish policies, and we did establish policies. We had 3 different committees. One of them was a policy committee, one was, of course, design and engineering committee, and one was more about enforcement and encouragement. Develop a program that fits into our mobility program overall, and we'll touch upon that in a second. Specific projects, and then what partnerships are essential to ensure that we have continuing safety and continuing measures of effectiveness. And then on the metrics piece, we've started with a Vision Zero dashboard that maps and accounts for fatalities and severe injuries. So similar to Matt's presentation, we did establish our high injury network. That's always a great place to start to understand where crashes are occurring, why are they occurring, when are they occurring, and what are the different factors that you need to consider to address those challenges beyond engineering and design alone. And similar to Atlanta, we found that almost 3/4 of our severe injuries and fatalities were happening on about a quarter. Now in Atlanta, that's even more pronounced with 10%. Ours was about 24%. And they correlated with 3 things. One is income. So a lot of these crashes correlated with lower income, lower access neighborhoods that also tend to have large arterials passing through it, multi-lane arterials. So that was one of the challenges. The other was access to either shopping or transit. So the residences on one side and other means like commercial areas and access. So that was the other piece of it. And then the third was about half of these crashes were nighttime crashes. So it's clearly much more than an engineering challenge. It's a social issue as well. And it is about what we ultimately as a society accept between efficiency and safety, and how do we kind of reconcile that. So these were our marching orders. We knew where to target these investments. The next was, what do we do about this? How do we get the benefit out there the most? And the Safe Streets for All program presented an opportunity to significantly ramp up our quick build program. And that really uses temporary materials in lieu of concrete and more expensive materials, with some paving, which for most cities tends to be the #1 complaint in community value surveys and things like that. So it was kind of getting a bigger bang for our buck. And then we applied that systemically. So using our Vision Zero action plan, of course, is based on a safe systems approach, but we're also using systemic safety, meaning if a facility is seeing certain kinds of crashes, similar facilities may at some point also have the same problem. So kind of keeping that in mind and putting a program together. So with that in mind, with the $20 million award and $5 million match from the city, so total $25 million, we have 3 types of projects. One are triage projects, and these are quick builds on our high injury network. To quickly get speed reduction measures, better crossing opportunities, better visibility, and redesign for bike and peds. The other are preventive care, so safety improvements near places that people go to, parks, schools, transit. And now we also have a Safe Routes to Food program, especially in lower income, lower access neighborhoods, where single parents may be lugging around 4 or 5 grocery bags along with 2 children. That Safe Routes to Food becomes very essential. That's something they do every day. And then we also had a comprehensive pedestrian safety and equity action plan along with our MOVES, which was our mobility plan. A big feature of this was equity. That's in the name itself, Tampa Systemic Applications for Equity, T-SAFE, wherein 3/4 of the budget will be spent in communities of concern. Again, that's where the problem is, that's where the money is going, and we'll just touch upon what some of those projects look like. So he touched upon quick build improvements. Even prior to receiving the award, we had started retooling our paving team and engineering teams to work together and deliver more quick build projects as part of their maintenance paving program. That's worked out really well. We have to include, other than transportation, stormwater as well in a place like Tampa, where we do have a lot of ponding, pooling, that kind of stuff. And then some of the countermeasures that we're looking at, again, crossings, median islands, narrowing lanes for reducing speed, and general traffic calming. The two pictures that you see out there are a result of one of those quick build projects. It's the same facility. It's the Cass Bridge in downtown Tampa. And the intersection painting on the bottom right there is the crossing for our river walk. That segment of the river walk does not go under the bridge. You do have to come back up on the surface, and so we've made it a little more prominent. Of course, these are all quick build projects, meaning we do hope at some point to make these much more permanent installations. So let's look at projects in general. You've got East Tampa, Ybor City, that area in general, or historically, has been a strong African-American population or majority neighborhood. Again, a lot of arterials in the area, some collectors as well. So we've got most of our projects within that zone, if you will. And of course, this slide is for people that are more familiar with the geography, but there's a lot going on out here. Ybor City is a historic entertainment district. You've got a lot of interstate work happening in the area. And so a lot of these projects, what they aim to do is not just improve safety, but improve connectivity across the interstate, across water bodies. So connecting neighborhoods is part of it, and of course you see schools as well. West Tampa is the other diverse neighborhood, majority Hispanic, Cuban immigrants. In fact, a lot of the Cuban immigration or migration happened before Miami in Tampa, and that predates like well over 100 years back. And in Florida, there's this ongoing rivalry who came up with the Cuban sandwich, Tampa or Miami. I have a clear preference, but that apart. So similar projects in the West Tampa neighborhood as well. West Tampa is also separated by the interstate, but also the river. So all the things that are going on in the downtown area and the Ybor area are not as well connected to West Tampa. A big improvement or a big announcement on that, as of last week, we just approved, or council approved, a contract to build a river walk on the west side of the river as well. Tampa currently has a river walk on the east side through a build grant and other funds. We're now embarking on building that river walk that will activate the waterfront and extend Bayshore Boulevard, which is like the signature Tampa facility, and create a similar facility for neighborhoods on the other side of the interstate, and a lot of imaginary boundaries that were drawn across neighborhoods in the past. North Tampa, this is by the university area, 15th and 22nd, 15th Street, 22nd Avenue are or used to unfortunately be referred to as Suitcase City, meaning there were a lot of transient populations out there, people moving in and out, a lot of people that were transit dependent or walking and biking across very high-speed arterials. So some of these projects, along with the school out there, would benefit that area as well. And in the downtown area, we've got Twiggs Street and Scott Street. So Twiggs is one of the streets in our downtown. Our downtown's a peninsula, water on three sides, that connects the channel on one end to the river and the river walk on the other end. And it has been contextually, even though it's part of the CBD, a faster moving roadway because of certain connectivity issues. So that was part of this suite of projects as well. We're also making better connections to transit routes, and this is a combination of enhancing stops, but also enhancing access from neighborhoods, mainly in East and West Tampa, to transit routes. That was part of our application and our projects also. So where we're at right now is we've done our initial planning and project development. Council just approved the grant, and so we're in the process of procurement to bring on a design build contractor. We're going to try something different. We're trying to create fewer pay items, a tighter scope, and put a design build option out there with a fixed sum and get a team that can do the most work out of it. Some of the match related work we've already started on, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So it's time for implementation. So some of the upcoming quick builds that we have, I mentioned our paving team and our engineering teams work together on that. Both of these are actually complete. This is a slightly dated presentation. Main Street and then ARDC were both completed last year, actually. And those were supposed to be parts of our match for the Safe Streets for All grant. So we've also won a Safe Streets for All planning grant. That was in 23. What we just saw were projects relative to the 22 grant. And part of that, plus the build grant for the Riverwalk, plus 2 raise grants, again, similar grants, connecting communities. We have a reconnecting communities grant as well. All of these are helping transform Tampa's fabric from a car-centric primarily to a city that's a little more friendly to pedestrians and bicyclists. And I say a little more friendly deliberately because we have a long way to go. All of these are quick build projects. All of these are concepts that we know will work because they're based on works in other cities as well. And we'd like to build on it. But my message to the other cities as well is part of this success, I feel, is because we had more comprehensive planning, that 5-pronged or working across silos. So we have a resilient Tampa plan that connects to our Vision Zero Action Plan. Our Vision Zero Action Plan is a subset of our Moves Mobility Plan. And having all of these planning efforts happen concurrently, and our Parks Master Plan as well, working together and pointing at each other really sends a message to funders that you've done your homework and you expect better outcomes hence. So I look forward to questions later. Thank you.
So our next presenter is Matt Fall from City of Jacksonville on Vision Zero in City of Jacksonville. Matt Fall served as a bicycle pedestrian coordinator for the City of Jacksonville, Florida, the largest city in Florida. Prior to joining the city, Matt served as associate planner at the California DOT, the Caltrans, and a senior bicycle pedestrian planner with North Central Texas Council of Government in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and at the U.S. DOT as well in Washington, D.C. as a special policy analyst and a special staff for U.S. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox. Matt's passion is improve safety for bicycles and pedestrians while also elevating the level of comfort for roadway most vulnerable users. Matt holds a bachelor's degree in economics and policy from UC Berkeley and a master's degree in public administration from George Washington University. Matt enjoys all kinds of cycling from open road to BMX and spending time with his family at the many beautiful parks and the beaches throughout Jacksonville. Please welcome Matt Fall.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, there's my drone shot. That's why my file is so big here. Is it working? Yeah, a little bit. Sorry, I get excited about that stuff. So I'm talking a little bit about a city perspective. We're just starting our Vision Zero action plan. We won a Safe Streets for All grant in 2022, and we're just now, we've been a little slow, but we're just now starting it off. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the impetus behind a city taking these steps to do a Vision Zero action plan. I also have kind of a side narrative of how planners and engineers can most effectively work together. So, ton of information. You don't need to digest it all. Just listen and pick up on the high points. Quick snapshot of Jacksonville is we're largest city by land area in the contiguous United States. So the lower 48, we're the largest. We're just under 1 million in population, but we're growing fast. We're one of the places that people are migrating to the most over the past 5 to 10 years. By 2030, we're thinking we're going to have a little over a million residents. Got way too many papers up here. So being the largest by area city in the United States means we have just massive amounts of linear miles of routes, which of course means that we have lots and lots of crashes as well. One of the things is we have so many state-owned routes. We have a lot of FDOT routes that go through Jacksonville. But we also have almost 3,000 miles of linear miles of city-owned and maintained routes. You know, one of the problems with this, as I mentioned, is lots of crashes. So this is the Smart Growth America's Dangerous by Design 2022. We kind of sit and wait with bated breath each year for this to come out. This year in the 2022 Dangerous by Design, we were ranked the 6th most dangerous city in America for pedestrian fatalities. We got a little better in the 2024 Dangerous by Design. We moved down to be ranked the 15th most dangerous in the city. We're still in the top 20, which obviously doesn't make us happy. But we are one of the only 2 out of the top 20 that are actually getting a little bit better. It seems like the bicycle and pedestrian fatality rate seems to be expanding in a lot of these cities. And this may come as no surprise. Well, actually, let me quickly talk about some of these statistics, or a little bit more crash statistics. So this is 2014 to 2023, 396 pedestrian fatalities in Jacksonville. In the same time frame, 60 bicycle fatalities in that time frame. And you know, this is one of the reasons FHWA in 2016 began their targeted approach to safety, and they came up with focus cities within focus states. They've since adjusted that to be focus MPO regional areas, but they're still the focus states. So Jacksonville is in a focus state because we have higher than national average pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. We're also in a focus MPO area, so the North Florida TPO, we're in that. So we got kind of double whammied on that. The one good thing about being a focus state or a focus MPO area is that we get prioritized when we ask for technical assistance from the federal government. So they've been really gracious and great with us. Anytime I say, hey, can you come down and give a workshop? I'll pull together 60 planners and engineers, and you come down and talk about the latest design guide or the latest, you know, whatever the roadway design happens to be at the time. And they're right down there 6 months later teaching a classroom full of engineers, all of the latest things. So this kind of brings me to my side narrative of, you know, if you're an engineer and you work closely with planners, be sure to have them reach out, even if they're not a focus city or a focus MPO area, reach out and see if you can get some workshops, bring in the latest designs. It should sort of be on the planners, in the planners' court to bring some of these brand new designs to the engineers. Again, looking at some of the data, this was the 2021 NHTSA traffic safety facts. We were ranked the 3rd most dangerous based on bicyclist fatalities in the country, 18.86 per 100,000 population, which was obviously very bad. This statistic came about right as I was beginning my tenure at the city of Jacksonville. And so the first thing I did was I said all of our bicycle facilities, and I just want to see where these crashes are happening. And they said, well, we don't have a map of any of this stuff. So that was the first thing I did was create an inventory, and I wanted everything on there. I wanted full attributes of what is the bike facility type, what's the length. I added everything that was existing, all of the planned projects that were coming up, and all of the funded projects. So if it had a little bit of money behind it, I added it to the calendar or to the map as a funded project. When you reduce it and get rid of all the planned and funded, it was really easy to see all of these gaps that existed in our network. As you can see on the map on the right there, the green lines, there's massive, massive gaps. I also jumped back to that crash map that I was looking at from 2011 to 2020, and I thought, there's a really interesting correlation of there seems to be a lot of reported fatalities and serious injuries right where we have a lot of these bicycle facilities already, so they're existing. So I thought, why is it so unsafe, even in areas where we have a lot of bicycle facilities? And the answer that I was able to find with that by looking at the attributes from the map that we had made was, it's the facility type. When you really break it down by facility type, we realized that Jacksonville, of everything that exists, all of the existing network, almost 80% of that are unbuffered bike lanes, which we know is in the hierarchy of things that feel safe and are comfortable to ride. That's one of the lowest. I mean, that's right above a shared lane. You really want to focus on getting shared use paths, separating cyclists and people walking from vehicle travel. If you can't do that, and you have to be in the street, make it a protected bike lane. That's second on the hierarchy. If you can't make it a protected bike lane, go buffered, or make it, if you can't do that, go with a wide, just striped out bike lane. But following this hierarchy, we realized most of the stuff we had really wasn't that great. It was all a bunch of unbuffered bike lanes. And so that brought up another question of why is that happening? And I think, this is an example of some of the stuff that we were looking at. So this is St. John's and Beach Boulevard in Jacksonville, and you can see tons of vehicle lanes, and it's posted high speeds. I think cars are generally going 50, 60 miles an hour here. And you have a 4.5 foot unbuffered keyhole bicycle lane that I just really think, unless you're feeling crazy that day, you're really not capturing anyone who's going to ride in that. So most of the cyclists in Jacksonville are going to be found on the sidewalk when it comes to this type of stuff. And this plays into what some of the performance targets are. So if your performance target is, when we design a new roadway, we want to include bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and it just ends there, and it doesn't talk about the type of facility you want to implement, you might end up with stuff like this, where the person designing the roadway looks at that limited right-of-way and just says, I'll check a box. I'll put this 4 foot unbuffered keyhole bike lane on there that's 1/4 of a mile long, and then I've done my job, and we meet our performance target. And this plays into, I have a little picture there of the John Forrester approach. He was an engineer in the 70s and 80s who said, enough of these bike lanes. Cyclists want to be intermingled with vehicles on the roadway, which, some people like that. Some bicycle clubs, they prefer that. But, we're really trying to focus on the all ages and all abilities folks and get those people through. I won't spend too much time on this, but this is sort of a typical section when I'm reviewing some of these projects. You'll see, okay, well, this is what they've proposed. It's 30,000 AADT, 45 mile per hour posted, and their solution to that for cyclists is a 5 foot unbuffered keyhole lane. So, these are some of that come up that we say, I think we can do better than this, and a lot of this is the impetus behind our Vision Zero effort. One thing, when a planner sometimes goes to engineers, especially if the designs are already chugging along, and we say, hey, I think we have a better idea. We could do something here. We could reduce the conflict area, whatever the solution may be, or the better roadway design. A lot of the things we'll get in response is, well, it's not in the budget. It's not in the scope. It's already been approved by a bunch of people. Here's a bunch of names. Or the facility already includes bike lanes. So, we're just going to keep it as it is, which isn't the greatest. So with all of that and those responses, we said as a city, it's our priority that we're going to prioritize the 8 to 80 all ages and all abilities groups here. We're not going to allow these 4-foot unbuffered bike lanes to come through, and we're going to look at that hierarchy of infrastructure and make sure that there's not only a facility there, but it's safe and it's also comfortable. This probably looks very familiar to a lot of you. It's the design user profiles. If you're doing those 4-foot unbuffered bike lanes, you're going to capture 4 to 7% of people that are just crazy and they feel like riding in the street and the roadway there. But really, if you can make these designs and make the roadway safer and more comfortable, you're going to get such a wider group of people. You're going to get that 8 to 80 group where your daughter or your grandma is able to walk or bike to the store. I always love this image as well. This is kind of the same. It shows the design user at the top, but then it shows the facility that they feel comfortable on the bottom. So you see you're capturing most people with a shared use path or a side path, separated or protected bike lane. Once you get into just buffered with paint, just a straight up bike lane, you have to be a little bit more brave. But once you get to shoulders and shared lanes, you're really only capturing 4 to 7% of users. I always love this. We did a statistically significant survey when I was in Texas. And one of the interesting things was 85% of people, and it covered the entire spectrum of people that felt comfortable on bikes and people that never ride bikes. And 85% of the people said, yeah, I feel comfortable riding on a shared use path. When you change that facility to a protected bike lane, you still captured 78% of the people that said, I'd feel comfortable there. That little curb or that whatever the vertical delineator that you're putting in there, you're still going to capture almost 80% of people that are going to feel comfortable riding there. I think a great rule of thumb, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, but defaulting to FHWA's Bikeway Selection Guide from 2019, they have this awesome table that I always reference. And it shows you, it puts the AADT in the y-axis and it gives you the posted speed in the x-axis. And I just think this is such a great rule of thumb for when you're at that stage and you think, we've already designed most of this roadway, what do we want to put in this roadway for bicycles? This is a great graph to look at and say, okay, this is, we're in let's say we have 8,000 AADT and it's a posted speed of 40. We're going to do a shared use path. We've met this requirement. I think we've done our best. This guide is also really great in tandem with Don't Give Up at the Intersection by NACTO. And this goes over all of those protected intersection designs that you can utilize. It's very common in Jacksonville to have, we'll get a great bike lane, but then we need to put all those left turn lanes and all those things at the intersection. So the cyclist is just left hanging 60 feet from the intersection. So we really want to make that so it's continuous through, and we keep them going through. I mean, I always liken it to if you wake up in the morning and you're going to drive to work, you never think, well, I hope all of the roads connect me to my job. You just know that it's going to be a connected network. And I think if you use this Don't Give Up at the Intersection, you're getting to that point with cyclists as well. I have a list of a bunch of guidelines that I love on our BikePed webpage. So this is just for if anyone wants to go look at that list and look at some other guidelines. So this all brings me to our Vision Zero action plan. All of this crash data, we knew that we had to do something about it in the city of Jacksonville. So we applied in 2022 for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, and we were awarded. With our local match, we had $350,000 to do our City of Jacksonville Vision Zero plan. This is the first time anyone's seen this logo. That's the stage we're at right now. So, and a lot, but just to reiterate, through our Vision Zero action plan, we want to identify our high injury network. We're going to take the same approach where we do it as a systemic predictive. We don't want to chase fatalities, as it's called. We don't want to say, well, the high injury network is from this fatality to this fatality. If the land use and the lanes and the posted speeds and everything around it are similar beyond that fatality, then I think you should extend your high injury network. And that's what we're going to do. We're also looking at a lot of recommended policies and actionable items, performance targets, performance measures, everything to get us going in the right direction. Demonstration projects, which have been talked about a lot here. This is crucial for the city of Jacksonville because we've had a history sometimes of designing these really great roadways and then going to the community and saying, hey, this is what you want and this is what we're going to give you. And we get so much pushback that it gets shelved. and it becomes a project that's a shelf-fulfilling prophecy, as they say. And we don't want that to happen. So, we see demonstration projects or quick build projects as a way of saying, hey, you're not married to this. It's going to be here for 8 months. Just get a feel for it. You might not understand the design at first, but just walk around or bike around in it, and then you'll see that it's great. And, if that happens, then we'll make it a permanent thing down the line. As other folks here have mentioned, our ultimate goal is to have our mayor and our council adopt this and become part of the Vision Zero network. One of the things, and I won't go too deep on this, and some of you probably know about this, a lot of you probably know about this, but to some of you, it might just be like, what is this new term that everybody's throwing around? In our scope for our Vision Zero action plan, we said, you have to take a safe systems approach. That has to be the cornerstone of everything that you all focus on when we do this important document. And so I'll talk about that just a little bit. I know I'm kind of running out of time, but with the safe system approach, broad strokes on that is that you are, instead of planning to completely end all crashes, it's never going to happen. You're looking at it from a human perspective where people are going to make mistakes, and you say, all right, crashes are going to happen. Humans are vulnerable to making mistakes. The human physical body is also vulnerable to being seriously injured when vehicles are moving quickly. So let's reduce speeds. Let's focus on these things. So some of the key points here. Well, I think the overarching thing that has already been mentioned is deaths and serious injuries are just not acceptable. We can't say, well, we can reduce it by half and have only 20 this year. We want to say they're all unacceptable. People make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable, so the force of the crash should be within the physical human tolerance, and that deals a lot with speeds. Responsibility is also shared, so it's not just the pedestrian is jutting out in the street or the vehicle or everybody's bad drivers. The road is a system that makes everyone needs to share to make safe. We also need to be proactive, not reactive, to the procedures that we do. We're not waiting for crashes to happen, as mentioned. We're gonna attack it systemically and predictively. The 5 elements that we talk about here is all elements create a safer overall system. That's part of the redundancy that we focus on. All users must understand their roles within that system. We need to create a safer overall system. Vehicle technology is making vehicles so much safer, but pedestrians are still getting hit and cyclists are still getting hit, and we're so vulnerable out there on the roadway that we need to reduce those to make this a safer network for everyone. So this is a great thing. All of these elements within the safe system approach, once you've sort of analyzed how you can operate each one, they all need to work together. And this is my cheese is good. If you even have one of those that you're not focused on or you're not paying attention to, you're not going to get through that whole system. And it just shows how altogether it needs to work. Again, a planning approach from the traditional to the safe system approach. Prevent crashes was the traditional way. The safe system approach says prevent all deaths and serious injuries. Improve human behavior. We need to design on the safe system side that humans are going to make mistakes. Control speeding was sort of the traditional way of planning for these, but with a safe system, we need to reduce speeds. Traditionally, individuals are responsible. Safe system, again, it looks at the whole roadway. We're all using the same roadway. So, sorry, I'm chomping on my mint here. We didn't want to wait for our Vision Zero action plan to be completed. Like I said, we're just starting it. So we went ahead and we did a speed study as part of a way to sort of preemptively strike some of these safety issues, which we finished this year. One of the things about this that I think is so great is we really made it super clear of this is the exact path that we're going to do. I think when you make it so simplified like this is something that we can take to council, we can take to elected officials, they understand. We can also take to engineers and they understand. It sort of captures everyone to simplify it to this level. I'm going to talk a little bit just quickly about how it also includes infrastructure investment. So investing in infrastructure was one of the problems that we had in Jacksonville, where even if you proposed a shared use path or something that's safer for people to ride on, it just didn't have a lot of feasibility behind it. Sorry about that. So we had this shared use path, this $15 or $20 million shared use path that was going to be built by our state. I was able to go to the final bridge inspection, and I said, hey, can I add some use just to see how many people use this, do a quick before and after? Because they hadn't actually included that in the original project. And what we saw was 83,000 people used this shared use path that our state had built within the first 4 months. So it was a way to prove demand, which I think is a responsibility of planners to help out engineers. You can't go to an engineer and say, hey, can you do this really expensive thing without showing that there's a demand for it and that it's going to be used. So having planners use these accounts and collect data that supports this type of demand is critical, I think, in getting a safer system. This is just more. That Fuller Warren shared use path became the third most used trail in all of Florida within the first year, which is great. Again, this sort of reiterates how planners should use counts and show demand, and that helps grease the wheels whenever engineers want to make something that's more substantial and supports bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. Once we got that first Fuller Warren Bridge and showed that demand, I kind of went crazy with counters, collecting all this data all around the city, showing, hey, we need this stuff, and people really want it. We're not just a beach community adjacent city. We are a city that could be bicycle pedestrian friendly for everyone. Luckily, we had a downtown system of trails called the Emerald Trail, and that got a $147 million Reconnecting Communities grant. One thing about that trail system that's going to be built now in half the time with the Reconnecting Communities grant is that it's actually 16 miles in from the coast. And, we want to connect these things so everybody in the city can use them and not just the people downtown, especially since the East Coast Greenway will be coming down the coast, and we want to loop in with that. Most of you may know about the East Coast Greenway, but it's a huge trail system along the East Coast from Maine to the Florida Keys. Sometimes they call it the lobster to manatee. But that's something that I think every city or every state along the route wants to tie into, and we're no different. We wanted to do the same. This is a part of it that goes right by the convention that we're at right now. We're looking at connecting to that through a trail. We're doing an alignment feasibility study right now called the core to coast connection. So we would connect that urban core to the coasts. So a quick summary of planners and engineers working together. It's really important that we do work together. We get feedback and teach each other, and we're working early on in projects and not waiting until things are at 90% design to say, hey, can we put some bulb outs here? Planners must develop master plans, long-range transportation plans, share project best case studies, and share the latest guidance documents so everyone is abreast of what the latest designs are. Planners should also organize training workshops and bring engineers into that so people can see what's new. And planners should document demand, as I mentioned, with the shared use path, and solicit public buy-in through user counts and studies and outreach to show that there's a demand for this and make it easier for engineers to create those designs. That's it. Sorry, I went over my time a little bit. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. So we have our last speakers, Bryan Hill with AECOM Vision Zero in Metro Nashville. As a bicycle automobile crash survivor, instrumental role in Vision Zero and the safety action plan across the country. Since 2015, he has championed safety through citywide campaigns, safety route to school studies, statewide transportation plan, and the safety implementation plan. He has led and contributed to award grants under the SS4A program in several states. Currently, Bryan serves as a project manager and a strategic advisor for Vision Zero and the safety action plan in Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Rhode Island, and Michigan. Please welcome Bryan.
Thank you very much, Zan. And thank you to presenters before me. So I'm going to talk to you today about implementing Vision Zero. We're working with the city of Nashville. We're working with a number of other communities throughout the East Coast, as Zan mentioned. So what I'm going to talk to you today is mostly going to be framed around Nashville, but I am going to bring in some other principles and work that we're doing that we hope can be useful anywhere. So the kind of the projects that I'm going to talk about here are a fatal crash investigations project, which we oftentimes see, going after crashes where they've occurred and doing some design that's a reactive approach. It's also a responsive approach. So we want to be responsive to where crashes are happening, what the issues are. But we, of course, also want to take a systemic approach as well. So I'll talk about conceptual design work we're doing for the city of Nashville, sort of summing up some of that quick design build and intersection improvements. I'm going to talk about some grant projects that align with some of the things that previous speakers already spoke about. And I'm going to talk about some implementation planning services. And I think this provides some useful insights on how we can incorporate those systemic and responsive approaches to implementing a Vision Zero campaign. Just a moment about myself. Zan already gave me a great introduction, so I won't say much here. I'm an active bicycle commuter. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I help them implement or start their Vision Zero campaign and help them pass a resolution. You can see me there on the screen talking to the city council. I've helped Bike Anchorage start their Anchorage Vision Zero campaign back in 2015-16. So, and I've worked all over the U.S. Working on this issue, so it's hugely important to me. Just quickly wanted to call out Val Martinez. Been working with her. She is the Vision Zero coordinator for the city of Nashville. Has been a great leader there. This slide has links to their safety action plan and some of their programs. I didn't have any part in those efforts. We were hired to help them implement, and so that's what I'm going to talk with you about today. But I wanted to bring up her information so that you all had it. So first, our fatal crash investigations project. So over the last 3 years, we have been trying to provide a responsive approach to addressing serious injuries and fatal crashes in the Nashville area. Here you can see a picture of me up there on the street looking at a crash site. So when we receive fatal crashes are reported by NMPD, fatal serious injury crashes, and some of them are flagged as being able to be addressed with quick build projects. And so we'll go out and we'll look at the last 10 years of crashes, the last 3 years of crashes, and then we'll go out into the field and look at what we see on the site. And we'll come up with short-term quick build recommendations and long-term recommendations. And so in 2022, we did 62 of those site visits. All of them produced reports. In 2023, we did close to 70. And this year alone, we've done 27 site visits through June. So this slide sums up the general types of improvements that we're recommending. So as you can see here, this aligns with the Safe Systems Roadway Design Hierarchy that was released by Federal Highway Administration. They recommend as their sort of first tier for the types of improvements that should be focused on are those removing severe barriers, which also includes separating users. And so about 70% of what we recommended include things like bike ped improvements, striping and delineation, curbing extensions, which could include bulb outs, those things that are really going to separate out the different users. And so it aligns with that. I also want to show here that we had about half and half of short-term and long-term countermeasures that we were recommending based on these studies. And I'm not going to read all of this, but just to say like what we did here, essentially, with the types of countermeasures we're recommending include a variety of striping, signage, configurations, signalization, operations, lighting and illumination. So there's a pretty broad spectrum, and these are all the kind of general most common countermeasures that we recommended at stop controlled intersections. And then similarly, here are the most common countermeasures that we recommended on roadway segments, non-intersection locations. And now the city is in the process. They have passed a memorandum and are allocating a pretty large pot of funding every year to traffic safety improvements. Some of these are already being implemented. I don't have that number with me today, but I know that they have already started, and I can show you some of the work that we're doing to help them start facilitating that. So we are doing some conceptual design work. These are both quick build and sort of permanent infrastructure improvements. So here you can see that we're recommending things like where to put in flex posts and bollards and transverse striping, where to install signage, where to install new lights and lighting, how to perhaps reconfigure so that we can start to change the operations on that section of roadway. The next thing that we've been helping them with is a series of grants, and I'll talk about a couple of them here. We helped the city go after a SMART grant that was targeting 4 intersections and 3 mid-block crossings. And that provided the opportunity to identify, you can see the picture with all of the blue there, that's where we identified where there are pedestrians crossing outside of crosswalks. So you can see where people are crossing the roadway there, and it helps us to identify things like where to install pedestrian hybrid beacons or rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or put up some temporary barriers or signage. So we can start to target that stuff. In addition to actually targeting the improvements, this under a SMART grant, it also had a workforce development component. So we worked with several universities in the area and involved graduate students. We did some onboard intercept surveys on transit routes and kind of found out what people's preferences or concerns were along those routes. And then we also are doing some workforce training, working with a couple of the agencies within the area, NABCO, there's another one I can't remember the name of, but helping them to provide training to their staff on how to install these remote sensing equipment monitors so that they can actually go out into the field, and there'll be a workforce available in Nashville to continue this project on and help measure where close calls are happening or where pedestrians are crossing outside of crossing. Another grant project that I want to talk about here is a multimodal grant that we just helped the city apply for. This was on Dickerson Pike. It's a 1.2 mile section where there were 7 pedestrian crashes over the last few years. We are helping them with, we helped them with sort of preliminary high-level planning location for some hybrid beacons, concrete medians, improved striping, curb ramps, signage and detection, providing some cost estimates for that as well. And now I want to talk to you about the last component here, this idea of helping communities go from plan to action. Now, the following slides are not all necessarily relevant to Nashville. These are slides, this is information that we have utilized in several communities. It's things that we are discussing with Nashville, but it's not things that they've necessarily committed to. So I want you to keep that in mind. But ultimately, a lot of communities, are either moving to or have a plan in place, and that plan may identify a high injury network. It may identify priority areas. Some of my colleagues talked about the idea of addressing those areas that had the greatest equity issues. They may set guiding principles, and they may set action themes. But in order for a city like Nashville or another city that may have a lot of funding that they want to move quickly to actually implement projects, the need for a project pipeline, the need for the ability to develop and track projects quickly. And so we have developed several tools here that we're hoping to utilize to help them with that process. So we've developed these tools in other places. I'll mention those places as I go through the following slides. A prioritization tool, countermeasure application tool, looking at plan concurrence, developing KPIs or metrics, developing public interfaces, and an annual Vision Zero program of projects. And ultimately, these are the actions that those will help you, each community do. So starting with the prioritization tool, this is actually a picture from the Maryland DOT. This is a map of Maryland here. We helped them, AECOM helped them through this process where we looked at a series of criteria to help identify where those sort of hot spots were, where we didn't just look at where the fatal and serious injury crash is happening, but where were the crash densities highest. So those areas with over 75th percentile of crash density, those places with over 75th percentile fatal serious injury crash density, the crash density of non-injury crashes, the location of projects that are already on the high injury network, the location of existing identified safety improvements, maybe that was already on a STIP or another measure, and then the land use intensity. So you can kind of combine all of these things, and this may make a little bit more sense of it, to sort of start to prioritize projects. You can look at those different types of crashes. You can look at demographics. You can look at short trip opportunity areas. So those areas that may be along a transit route or may have mixed use density, mixed use development that would enable a lot more shorter trips. So you can highlight the important elements in those areas. So these factors all come together from both the prioritization side and the areas of need, and you're able to identify those highest priority locations. This next slide will provide a little bit more context for that. So again, this is from the Maryland DOT, but you can see here where we have the high injury network overlaid with these areas of need. So you can start to take that maybe very broad high injury network and start to home it into those focus areas a little bit more. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about briefly is a countermeasure application tool. So we looked at, we started out in Nashville talking with them about the 28 proven safety countermeasures that were, developed through the Proven Safety Countermeasure Initiative through the Federal Highway Administration. But we also wanted to develop a broader toolkit. And I know some of my colleagues here talked about the toolkits that they have provided. We looked at the common for NACDO. We also looked at the Federal Highways Multimodal Networks Guide from 2016. We looked at the peer communities. In this case, we looked at Maryland DOT and the countermeasures they recommended. We also looked at the countermeasures that were regularly being recommended and incorporated through the Fatal Crash Investigations Project there in Nashville. And through these processes, we were able to identify 50 countermeasures, or a little over the 50 countermeasures that aligned with these different sources. And so we have a table that looks at how each of these countermeasures aligns. And these are the general areas that those countermeasures fall into: bicycle pedestrians, striping and delineation, signalization, roadway reconfigurations, shoulder safety, operational improvements, curb safety or curb extensions, protected turning movements, planning and engagement, signage, speed management, visibility improvements, buffers, parking, and realignment. So this was a picture of sort of a first test of how to apply these countermeasures within the city of Nashville. So looking at some of this first tier of priority roadway segments, each of these is about a third of a mile. It varies between segments because the segments were measured intersection to intersection. But you see here there are this is just a smattering of medium intervention and high intervention, which are just categorized those countermeasures based on the time and money commitment needed for each. And we basically identified whether they would be strongly recommended, suggested, or use engineering judgment based on the criteria of some of the criteria that were mentioned by my colleague of the Federal Highways Bikeway Design Guide, also the Pedestrian Design Guide. So looking at where things like roadway speed, traffic, land use, and other conditions would recommend certain types of countermeasures. And so for all of these, we're sort of providing this table so then you can go very quickly and see where throughout the city different types of countermeasures might be recommended, or what in any one segment, what types of countermeasures might be most recommended as well. And then I have a graphical interface here. This is from The picture here is from actually from the city of Raleigh. We did a similar process, designing transit-oriented development projects along a designed bus rapid transit route. We were looking at station area, about half-mile buffers, and trying to apply at scale these types of countermeasures. Finally, I want to talk about performance indicators. So again, there's a couple of these that have been adopted by the city of Nashville, but a lot of these are indicators that we've looked at with other communities as well. So you look at the sort of the 5 common E's of Vision Zero: engineering, evaluation, encouragement, education, and enforcement. Now, I know what's missing here is equity. We consider that as flowing through all of them. And you can up with both lagging indicators and leading indicators for each. Lagging indicators would be those like are being produced through the fatal crash investigations, where you're looking at what's already happened, providing a responsive approach. And leading indicators are looking at more of a safe systems approach, where you are looking at what can we change about the existing environment to prevent future crashes from happening or make them safer. So we have, for each of those areas, we have identified sort of some of the common lagging and leading indicators that we have utilized or discussed with our communities. And then finally, I just want to touch on a couple of things that my colleagues have touched on here, and that's the safe systems approach and the 5 E's. When talking about the safe systems approach, I really want to boil it down into 3 areas. And that's making sure that any solutions you provide are addressing cause and context. We can use the data to identify where the location is, but we want to make sure that our solutions are addressing cause and context. The next one is prioritizing systemic change over the behavior of individuals. So what are we doing from a policy perspective or from a design perspective that looks at the entire system, how the roads are designed, how the operations are designed? And then finally, incorporating systemic risk along with the causes of individual crashes. So, you talked about the roadway design configurations may be the same on a roadway that didn't have any fatal crashes yet on it, but that doesn't mean that it's any safer. So making sure that we incorporate that as well. And then the 5 E's. This is again, going back to balancing that proactive approach, that safe systems approach with a responsive approach, making sure that we're using the E's to effectively address all parts of the governing agency, to incorporate engineering, education, evaluation, encouragement, and enforcement across the system. And with that, we will open up to any questions you all have. Thank you very much.
So we are open up for questions. For any of the panelists, not panelists, presenters, speakers. So can you use a microphone over there? Yes.
The gentleman from Jacksonville has shown a slide about reducing speeding in local neighborhoods. And I'd be interested if you have a magic bullet for some of that, because we have so many complaints of speeding and we're trying to find ways to slow people down. There are speed humps, but they complain about the noise of speed humps. Is there anything else that we can do?
Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, we're in the same position. We had so many residents reaching out and saying, people are going through my neighborhood very quickly. And we tried so many different approaches of, if everybody chips in, you can buy your own speed humps and we'll put them in and that type of stuff. So our study, we haven't begun to implement it yet, but I think we came up with some interesting ideas. And like you said, there's no granny to clear everything up, but approaching it from several different ways and coming up with different policies, and also working in roadway design, let's narrow some lanes and try to figure things out. It's a collection of all different things, and we're just beginning to implement it, like I said, but you can check out our study, and we have a pretty good roadmap of how we're planning to proceed with that. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Can you have a microphone behind? Oh, it's over there. The person, you have a question? Yeah.
Great presentations, everyone. So my question cuts across all of you presenters, I guess. Behavioral issue is a big cause for safety concern. So kind of going back to Carla's magic bullet, I guess, if you have, or is there a way to address that? Do you have an 80-20 rule that, if you apply this, then it addresses a good number of behavioral issues? And I know education has been an issue, or enforcement, like the 5 E's you mentioned. But what is the experience across all of you that you can highlight?
I don't mind. This one's not working. Okay. All right. Thank you. And I think that's a really good question. So I think when looking at behavior, it's important to look at what mode you're talking about and what your objectives are. So relative to the conversation right now, a lot of it is about preventing fatalities and major injuries. So looking at one mode at a time, when you look at pedestrians or bicyclists, generally they exert more physical stress when they're getting from point A to point B relative to vehicles for obvious reasons. And what that means is it's going to be a little bit harder for them to change their natural behavior when, especially in Florida, it's 100 degrees out there and you're asking them to walk, say, 220 feet to a crosswalk, because geometrically that makes a lot of sense because there may be a horizontal curve or whatever else. Accounting for that behavior is important. Prioritizing that behavior is important. So, you call it dens or whatever, they're going to go where they're going to go, which is why when you develop Vision Zero and safety strategies, that community engagement is really important. The listen first approach is important. What is it that the community is trying to do? Ultimately, if you're designing for them, then it makes sense to design where they're going. With bicyclists, it's the same. And that point was made by all of the panelists out here. And that is, and I don't mean to kind of, put down any particular type of bicyclist, but there's the spandex crowd that is extremely bold on the streets and will take risks that, regular bicycle users will not. So we really have to start with our goals. And in Tampa's case, at least, our goal is that all bicycle facilities that we design henceforth going forward will either be designed for or retrofitted to be separated in some way, shape, or form. And again, that just increases comfort, that increases safety. The data on that is very clear. And typical East Coast cities that have limited rights of way, that's about as well as you can do consistently. So I'll leave it at that. Oh, and to the neighborhood speeding point, I mean, I agree that is among the most common concerns. It has especially spiked after the pandemic. And there are two aspects to it, just based on a practitioner's perspective. The first is perception. Unfortunate but true, neighborhood streets are more constrained. They do tend to be narrower. And so a vehicle going 30 miles an hour through a neighborhood street might feel like it's going 50 miles an hour. And so there is a lot of that. And we have data to support that through speed studies that we've done. Of course, that does not satisfy the community because their threat perception is their reality at some point. So what we've found to be useful or helpful is to take a neighborhood approach. So we retooled our Vision Zero team. We call them the Vision Zero tech team that works with the Vision Zero action team and operations. And when they go in with these complaints, they don't just look at that one street. They look at the area, what's going on, and we work one area at a time. And we found that to be helpful for that. But what it also means is there are a lot other community members that feel like, well, why hasn't my concern been addressed in time? But that's the bane of every public employee. So
Yeah, I want to just say that, yeah, I agree with you. A lot of times it's perception. What we do is we'll do a speed study in the neighborhood at several locations. And we won't even do anything if it's not 10 miles over the speed limit, because a lot of times they really don't have a speeding problem. And we also try to get the homeowners association to do with their residents and, tell them not to quit speeding, because most of the times if we send the sheriff department to give tickets, they ticket neighbors and then they're just all mad.
All right, thank you. I think we run out of time for today, and let's give our speaker a round of applause. Thank you. And a final announcement is that we have a karaoke tonight at 6:30 at the Beachcomb Barbecue and Grill. So food, beer, wine, and your colleague will be provided, and karaoke as well. So enjoy your night. Thank you.
she reached out right before you all started the Vision Zero action plan and all of that. She said very nice questions, and it's been out of
You're asking us to post for a group photo. Oh, yeah. So it's right here.